Thank you for joining me. For those who don't know me, I'm Lori Sutherland, a composer, clarinetist, and more. And I'm excited to be here and hopefully talk you through some things that you'll see in Holst, because there's a good chance that you either have already played it or you will be playing it. Um, because it's,
Played it zillions of times,
yes, yes,
too many times.
I don't know that I can count how many times I've played it at this point.
Sometimes you just don't count anymore. You just
Right,
know your part, and you just like,
right. You know what's happening. So hopefully everyone can see what I shared on my screen. And
da, da, da,
I
da.
uploaded a PDF of this so that you can download that and refer to it later as well. Um, so with Holst, like we've said, there's a good chance you'll play it. You have played it. What happens if you haven't played it in 20 years, or maybe this is your first time that you've played it? So hopefully some of these tips and tricks will help as a section to uh, to make us sound cohesive as a unit. And like I said, I'm focusing on the B flat parts, but honestly, the E flat, alto, and bass also have a decent amount of this. So you should be able to apply it
Yes,
to whatever
I can
part
tell you that right
you're
now.
using. Yes. So I'm covering spots in the first and third movements because those are the two that are most likely to be played. And so we're going to ignore the second movement for now, partly because of time. So, with this first section in the first movement, um, as you can see how I grouped all the parts together, the section is moving as a whole rhythmically. And because of that, we do have to pay attention to our articulation. I highlighted the little note that says staccato. And so keep a nice light staccato through this section. The exception becomes at the quarter notes. Every group I've been in has held those quarter notes full length and do not play them staccato. So I'm going to play just the first little bit just to give an idea of what I'm talking about. So you keep that nice length at the end. And by having everybody do this, it really brings us together as a section and gets us to match each other. Um, One of the challenges of this first section going up to B is the keeping your tempo and your rhythm. My big advice would be to avoid breathing on every eighth rest, if you're able to. If you're able to get through two or more measures, that will help keep you in tempo. As soon as we start breathing on every little rest, it's just natural for us to slow down. And if you find that you're getting off too much, sit out a measure and regroup and come back in at the next one. That also helps us work as a section to keep everything going. So any any questions on this first bit? It's basically just articulation, keep your rhythm going, know that our whole section is moving together. Okay. So I realize a lot of this will be just kind of talking at you, but I will open up at the end for further questions on everything. So the next part in the first movement that we have an issue with is this big, huge run at B. And it's both good and bad that a lot of people are playing it. It's good because you have safety in numbers, but it's bad because if people get off, then it's easier to tell that, oh, someone else is, they're not playing together. But there are ways to break this down and make it a little easier. For those who happened to be here for our event last year, and if you happen to catch my presentation about learning how to play runs, I have those techniques can be used for this. I put my my PDF from last year in the chat. So that's a resource you can use to learn this run. Another thing to do is notice that Holst did some nice things for us. He does a lot in F major, and we were just playing our F major scales in warm-up. So continue practicing that F major scale. Notice when he uses it as is. He does break it apart and put some accidentals and some non-scale movement in there. But the more you can see the patterns and feel the patterns of the scale, that will give you a leg up for learning this whole run. And then later on, he turns it into a C major scale. So we all know our C major scales. That's pretty much one of the first scales we ever learned. So we should feel very comfortable with that. The catch is going up to that altissimo notes. And that's where things can get a little dicey. He throws all three clarinet parts, all three B flat parts up in there. He takes no mercy on the thirds. Everybody is up there. So some things to remember with your altissimo. Air and voicing. Air, as Debbie was talking about in the warm-up, keep that nice fast airspeed going. We need that as we're going up into these higher notes. Also our voicing, our tongue position. Try to keep your nice key position to help up into that. Up there. So once we start dropping our tongue up there and start doing ha, we're going to lose those notes. So what if you've been practicing this and some parts still just aren't cutting it and your concert is tomorrow? So this is where knowing how and where to sit out and come back in. If there are spots where it's just not working for you, and my thought is like here, once it gets up to the altissimo, that's going to be where most of us, I think, have the issues of, okay, it's just not working, especially because that's further along in the run and we're already running out of air. So one thing I would consider doing, go through this C major scale and stop on that A. Rest, come back in on the F, etc. Or if you need to come in on the next measure. But at that point, start practicing where you're going to cut out and come back in, just so that you're prepared on where to do it. Mark your music if you need to. Talk to your stand partner. And depending on how big your clarinet section is, this may or may not help in terms of being able to cut out. If you have a large clarinet section, that helps because, again, there's more people to cover if someone needs to sit out. Keep in mind, the flutes also play this. I think the oboe has some of it. I know bass clarinet has some of it. And I think even the saxes might have a little bit of this. So that helps cushion any place that you might need to sit out.
E-flat clarinet too.
Pardon?
E-flat clarinet.
Yes, E-flat has a lot of this too. So wherever you can, know that, like I said, there's safety in numbers. There are a lot of woodwinds, not just clarinets playing this. So that helps with us deciding where to sit out. So let me check my time. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but I do want to get into the march, which is the third movement, and then we can always come back and chat some more. Part of the reason I wanted to bring up this section of the march, which is right after the key change, I call it the trio section. Um, we're we're all playing together in this first half. We are completely in unison in the B flats, and so it's important that we move as a section. So just because it's legato and it's pretty, we need to keep the air moving between the notes to get a nice smooth legato. Don't let your air drop after every note, which it's easy to do. Keep your air moving and get that nice smooth legato. That said, just because it's legato, we doesn't mean we get to slack on rhythm and tempo. It's very easy to turn this into it's easy to really want to milk this because it's a very pretty melody. It's quiet, it's legato, it's still a march. We need to stay precise with our fingers, with our movement, and be deliberate even though we're legato. Make sure that you're still crisp with your finger movement and stay together. That helps us keep together too. Because once we start drifting off into, oh, this is pretty and I want to linger on this note, the rest of the group has already left us. So keep that in mind with this section. And keep forward motion. That's another thing. When we play legato and a little bit quieter, it's so easy to start dragging our tempo. Again, this is still a march. We need to keep moving forward in it. And then there's the descant. This part, again, Holst really shows no mercy to any part. He's throwing everybody up in the clarion and altissimo. So with this, rhythm is going to be one of the big things. The rhythm isn't hard, but you have to be precise with your rhythm, precise with your articulation. Because again, we're all moving together along with flutes. Oboe doesn't have this as much, but clarinets of all types have this. The flutes have it, possibly the saxophones, I can't remember. And so we want to keep our crisp articulation. We want to keep our rhythm going, stay in tempo. The catch down at when it gets into the triplets, every group I've been in, it has been fine to slur the triplets. And I think some of the newer editions actually specifically mark them as slurred. If you have the really old editions like what I uploaded in the chat, it's not especially clear whether they're slur or tongue. But every group I've been in, no conductor has minded if you slur the triplets. And once you get up to that speed, if you're able to tongue them, more power to you. I can't. That it just gets a little too fast for me. So slurring the triplets is fine. Chances are you are still going to need to tongue that quarter note after the triplet. That depends on your director and how picky they are with whether that gets tongued. I've done it as tongued, but again, it depends on the group you're in for that. And then he gets up into the altissimo again for everybody. Like I said, he shows no mercy on the thirds. He throws all three B flat parts up there. I know the E flat has this too. The flutes have it. So altissimo, keeping, like we talked about in the first movement, that airspeed, the fast airspeed, your voicing, keep your tongue nice and high and help get those out. Again, what happens if it's getting to the concert and things just aren't going the way you want them to go? This is where we simplify again. There are several things you can do. You could play, and I'm just going to take at 11, you could just skip the triplet completely. You could do that. You could, so that's one of the, in a way, that might be one of the easier things to do. But again, practice it that way so that you're used to what you're playing. And then when you get up into this scale that just keeps going higher and higher and higher, this is another spot where maybe play through the end of a measure, decide how far you can go, and then sit out for the rest. And then probably at that point, I would just sit out the complete measures. I don't know if I would try to worry about coming in for partial measure. But again, this depends on how many people are in your section, how many woodwinds you have in general, what the balance is, and figuring that out. If you do sit out for a few measures, and I would not blame you at all if you did, I would come in on this A half note. Because even though it's at the end of the measure, it's actually the pickup into the next phrase. And again, you would just mark your music and say, okay, I'm sitting out here, talk to your stand partner, get a plan on how this is going to work out. But the flutes have it. They, so let them shoulder some of the burden too. Take advantage of the fact that other people are playing this. And so, yeah, part of playing in ensembles is knowing what's working for you, what's not working for you, whether you have to sit out, and it's okay if you do, because there are times I sit out on stuff too. So being able to say, okay, this is how I'm going to do this. I am specifically going to rest in these measures. And that can help you then come back in more solidly with the section. And then you're still helping out the section and you're still being a section player. But it's being aware of what things you might need to adapt as a concert gets closer. Of course, I would recommend do your best to practice the entire thing, for as long as you can. But there does come a point where we have to say, okay, maybe I won't go for these notes, because it's better to sit out for a few measures for the sake of the section than to push through and have things, maybe not work out the way you want them to. So be aware of that. But I hope that some of this, I know I went really fast because I want to make sure that I leave time for questions. But I hope that this helps see how in this particular band piece, and in so many other band pieces, the clarinet section is a section. And we do have to pay attention to what the other parts are doing. It's not just me playing my part, it's me playing my part to fit in and be a cohesive unit with the rest of my section. So thank you so much for listening to this, and I hope that some of these tips have helped. And so I do want to open it up to questions in the last few minutes that we have. So feel free to either jump in the chat or either jump in the chat or feel free to unmute yourself at this point. And hopefully everyone got a chance to look at or download what I put in the chat for the PDFs. And like I said, my email is in there as well if anyone wants to get in touch afterwards. Any questions? Any comments?
Yeah, Pat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is it possible? I know in these long ones, there's this legato going on, there's
Mm-hmm.
like one, two, three, four, five measures. So how do you, let's say, if you're having some breathing difficulties and because even in the always legato, you're going way up there, like in measure 23, I
Mm-hmm.
going up to a high D. Sometimes at that point, you have no air, you know.
Right, right.
So,
That's an excellent question because this section at B is a very long run, and yes, he has many measures under one legato slur. This is another place where strategically sitting out for maybe a beat. You don't necessarily have to do a whole measure at that point. Um, and planning with your stand partner or whoever you're sitting around to say so maybe uh so maybe the beat 3 before it goes into the C major scale,
right,
maybe you say I'm not going to play that beat at all, and that's when I'm going to breathe. That's an option for something like this. um and to find the places where you can breathe in conjunction with your section, just so that not everybody is breathing on that same beat 3.
right.
Does that help?
Yeah. If you have more than, uh, let's say, six people in the section, there are
Mhm.
some bands you don't have that luxury because you
Right,
don't have that many people. So,
right.
all
And
up to you.
yeah, and that does affect things. So at that point, um, I would probably start listening to what else the band as a whole is doing and try to listen to where if I breathe here, there's so much else going on in the rest of the band that
Yeah.
no one's going to notice. um,
Usually the usually the trumpets are the loudest. So at
yeah,
that point, you can sort of, you know, take your time and catch your breath and
yes, yes. And for me, who usually is playing bass clarinet, like in a march, I know that the tubas have the part I'm playing. So I can kind of rely on, ooh, the tubas I know are doing just fine there. I can take my breath during that part type of thing. So yeah, just being aware of what else the ensemble is doing beyond just your section, because I know some clarinet sections are really really tiny. Um, One of my friends plays in a community band in her area, and they only have 4 B flat clarinets. So, so yes, there are times you have to be aware of how small your section really is, and that's where communication will really help to say, "Hey, I really got to breathe here," and go from there and talk to the rest of your section and say, "Hey, oh, so I got the pop up that we're at 20 seconds. So thank you so much for attending. I hope this helped. And like I said, feel free to contact me and enjoy the rest of the day."